In the summer of 1976, the heart of rural Ohio pulsed with quiet desperation. The nation was clawing out of a brutal economic recession, with factories shuttering and farms barely scraping by. For young women like my daughter Emily, college was a rare ticket out of our small town of Willow Creek, where opportunities were as scarce as rain in a drought. The reinstatement of competitive college admissions after years of economic upheaval had sparked hope and fierce competition. With her sharp mind and relentless drive, Emily set her sights on Ivywood University, a prestigious institution known for churning out lawyers, doctors, and leaders. "I'm going to make you proud, Mom," she'd say, her hazel eyes gleaming as she pored over her textbooks under the flicker of our kitchen's single bulb. Her dream wasn't just personal ambition. It was a rebellion against the gender biases of the era, where women were often expected to marry young and tend to the home rather than pursue higher education. Willow Creek was a place where the weight of tradition pressed hard. Men worked long hours in factories or fields while women like me, May, stitched together a living through odd jobs sewing, cleaning, or selling eggs from our few chickens. My husband Mason toiled as a line worker at the local steel factory, his hands calloused from years of labor. Emily at 17 felt the burden of his sacrifices. Dad worked so hard she'd whisper, guilt shadowing her voice as she helped me scrub dishes after dinner. "I don't want to be a burden." Her words cut me not because they were true, but because they revealed how deeply she internalized the town's unspoken rule girls should prioritize family over dreams. Emily's determination was a beacon in our dim world. She'd rise before dawn, studying by candlelight. When the power flickered out, her notes sprawled across our warped kitchen table. Ivywood wasn't just a school. It was her escape from a life of scraping by, a chance to prove that a girl from Willow Creek could be more than a farmer's wife. I'd watch her pride swelling in my chest, but also fear. The 1970s were unkind to women with ambition. College slots were limited, and rural girls faced skepticism from admissions boards who favored urban boys or those with connections. Emily's classmates, primarily boys, spoke of Ivywood with casual confidence, backed by parents with influence or money. We had neither. When the college entrance exam results came, the news hit like a sledgehammer. Emily had failed. The letter from Ivywood arrived crisp and cold, stating her scores fell short. I found her in her room, staring at the rejection, her face pale. "I thought I was good enough," she murmured, her voice cracking. "Maybe Dad's right. I may not be cut out for this." Mason, when he heard, didn't comfort her. Instead, he scoffed over the phone from the factory. "Told you, Emily. You aimed too high. Better start thinking practically. William's son needs a wife." William, a local farmer, had a dim-witted boy who'd inherit land but little else. The suggestion stung, reminded of Mason's growing distance, his late nights, and whispered calls I wasn't meant to hear. I urged Emily to try again and to study for another year. "You're smarter than half those boys," I said, gripping her hands. But she shook her head, tears welling. "I can't keep costing you and Dad money, Mom. I'll help out, maybe later." Her resolve, once fierce, crumbled under the weight of duty. She packed a small bag and joined a group of women doing seasonal work, picking fruit, cleaning houses, moving from town to town. I watched her go, my heart splintering. The rural economy offered little for a girl like her, and by 19 she married William's son, settling into a life of toil on a failing farm. Her letters grew shorter each year, her spirit dimmer, until her life faded into obscurity, marked by hardship and unfulfilled dreams. As I lay on my deathbed years later, the weight of her lost future crushed me. I'd failed to fight for her, to push against the world that told her to settle. In his pressed foreman's jacket, Mason stood by, his eyes cold. "She didn't deserve Ivywood," he said, words that would haunt me into the next life. That failure and betrayal set the stage for everything to come, a chance to rewrite her story and reclaim her future from those who stole it. As I lay on my deathbed in the summer of 1995, the hospital room in Willow Creek smelled of antiseptic and decay. My body, worn from years of scraping by in rural Ohio, was failing, but the actual pain was in my heart. My daughter Emily had faded into a life of hardship, her dreams of Ivywood University buried under the weight of a loveless marriage to William's son. Each shallow breath carried the guilt of my failure to protect her future. I'd watched her spirit dim, her letters from the farm growing sparse, her once bright eyes dulled by toil. In the 1970s, rural America offered little for women like her. College was a privilege, not a right, and girls were expected to marry, not study. I'd begged her to try again after her exam failure, but she'd chosen duty over ambition, believing she owed it to her father Mason, who worked long shifts at the steel factory. Mason stood by my bedside, his foreman's jacket crisp, his face hard. He'd climbed from line worker to regional manager, his ambition fueled by a hunger to escape our town's poverty. But his success came at a cost I hadn't seen until now. "You want the truth," Mayhe said, his voice cold as the Ohio winter. I gave Emily's Ivywood admission letter to Clara's son Holden. She didn't deserve it. A girl like her better off with William's boy. His words hit like a blade. Clara, his high school sweetheart, had re-entered his life years ago, a widow with a son he doted on. I'd ignored the whispers of their affair, hoping to shield Emily from the shame of a broken family. But this, he'd stolen her future and handed it to Holden, who'd strutted off to Ivywood while Emily labored in obscurity. Rage surged through me, stronger than my failing body. "You and Clara ruined her," I screamed, clawing at him with what little strength I had. Emily's voice echoed in my mind, her tearful confession. "After the rejection, I thought I was enough, Mom." Mason's betrayal wasn't just cruelty, it was a calculated choice. He'd always resented Emily's potential, seeing her as a reminder of the rural life he despised. Clara's son Holden was his ticket to a new family, one that fit his vision of success, urban, polished male. My hands trembled as I struck him, but he grabbed a pillow, his eyes empty of remorse. "Enough," he growled, pressing it over my face. The world darkened, my lungs burning, until a warm glow pulsed in my hand, my father's Vietnam War medal clutched tightly. A voice, soft yet commanding, whispered, "Rewrite her future." The medal's heat surged and my vision faded. When I opened my eyes, I was back in the summer of 1976, standing in our cramped Willow Creek kitchen. The air smelled of stale coffee and the faint tang of rust from the sink. It was the day we'd waited for Emily's Ivywood admission letter, when her dreams had died in my first life. My father's medal pinned to my worn dress felt alive. Its warmth reminded me of the voice that had brought me back. I was reborn, not by chance, but by the medal's power, a relic of my father's sacrifice in Vietnam imbued with his unyielding love for me. He'd died when I was young, leaving me this medal and a promise it'll protect you when I can't. Now it had given me a second chance to save Emily. I glanced at the calendar, July 15th, 1976. 17 and radiant. Emily burst through the door, her ponytail bouncing. "Mom, today's the day I'm getting into Ivywood." Knowing what Mason had done, her hope was a knife to my heart. In our past life, we'd waited anxiously only to learn she'd failed. Now I knew the truth. Mason had intercepted her letter, giving it to Holden to secure his favor with Clara. His ambition had always outstripped his loyalty. He'd married me at 18, pressured by my mother's promise that I'd be a hardworking wife, but he'd never loved me. Clara, with her city charm and son, was his escape from the rural life he loathed. Emily, bright and determined, was a threat to his new world, a daughter who could outshine his chosen heir. I clutched the medal, its edges biting into my palm. I said, "We're going to the post office, Emily," my voice steady despite the storm inside me. She nodded, her smile unwavering, unaware of the betrayal awaiting us. I slipped on my father's old military jacket, its bloodstains a testament to his heroism, and pinned the medal proudly. My limp from years of overwork slowed me, but my resolve was iron. Mason's factory was a half-day's drive, and I'd confront him there if needed. Emily's future hung in the balance. I'd fight for it this time. The medal's warmth pulsed, urging me forward, a beacon in the battle to reclaim what was stolen. The morning sun burned through the haze over Willow Creek, Ohio, on July 15th, 1976, casting long shadows across the cracked pavement of our small town. The air was thick with the scent of diesel and dust, a reminder of the factories that kept our rural community alive but tethered to poverty. In the 1970s, America was still reeling from economic stagnation. For girls like my daughter Emily, a college acceptance letter was more than a piece of paper. It was a lifeline out of a world where women were expected to marry young and labor in silence. Emily, 17 and brimming with hope, clutched my arm as we walked to the post office, her voice bright. "Mom, I know I got into Ivywood. I studied so hard I can feel it." Her optimism was infectious, but my heart churned knowing what I'd learned in my past life. Mason, her father, had stolen her admission letter and given it to Clara's son, Holden. I wore my father's Vietnam War jacket, its faded olive fabric stained with his blood, the metal pinned to my chest pulsing with faint warmth. It had brought me back to this day, reborn to right Mason's wrong. Emily's chatter filled the silence as we approached the post office, a squat brick building at the edge of town. What if I'm the first from Willow Creek to go to Ivywood? She mused, her hazel eyes sparkling. I want to study physics someday, Mom, and work for NASA. Her vivid dreams clashed with the memory of her past life, wandering from town to town, picking fruit, marrying William's dim-witted son. I swallowed hard, hiding my fear. You'll get there, sweetheart, I said, forcing a smile. Her hope was fragile, and I couldn't bear to tell her the truth yet. Inside the post office was dim, the counter operated by a grizzled clerk named Ed, who chewed tobacco and eyed us impatiently. Excuse me, I said, my voice steady despite the knot in my stomach. We're here for Emily Carter's college admission letter from Ivywood University. Ed squinted, flipping through a stack of mail. Your husband Mason picked it up this morning. He snapped, spitting into a tin can, said it was urgent. My legs buckled and I gripped the counter to steady myself. Emily frowned, confused. Dad got it. Why didn't he tell us? Her voice wavered, a crack in her confidence. I saw the doubt creep into her eyes, the same doubt that had crushed her in our past life when Mason mocked her failure. You aim too high, Emily. You're not cut out for college. The truth hit me like a freight train. Driven by his affair with Clara, his high school sweetheart Mason had intercepted the letter to secure Holden's place at Ivywood. In the 1970s, connections and favors often trumped merit, especially for rural families like ours with no clout. Mason's ambition had always been his god. He'd married me at 18, pressured by my mother's promise of a dutiful wife, but he'd never loved me. Clara, now a widow, and her son Holden were his vision of a better life, free from the stigma of Willow Creek's dirt roads. He'd chosen them over Emily, his daughter, dismissing her potential because she was a girl in a world that valued sons. I remembered his cruel words from our past life. Holden's got what it takes. Emily should marry William's boy and be done with it. Emily's hand trembled in mine. Mom, why would Dad take it without telling me? Her voice was small, the first seed of betrayal taking root. I knelt beside her, my father's metal warm against my chest. We're going to find out, I said, my tone firm. We're going to the factory to see him. The steel factory where Mason worked as a foreman was a 4-hour drive to the industrial outskirts of Cleveland. It was his domain where his charm and ambition had earned him a promotion, distancing him from us. I adjusted the heavy jacket, its weight grounding me, and led Emily into the humid morning. As we boarded a rattling bus to Cleveland, Emily stared out the window, her silence heavy. What if Dad doesn't want me to go to college? She whispered, her fingers twisting the hem of her dress. He's always talking about Holden and how smart he is. Maybe I'm not good enough. Her words echoed the despair of our past life when Mason's mockery had pushed her to abandon her dreams. I took her hand, the metal's warmth fueling my resolve. You're more than good enough, Emily. This letter belongs to you, and we're getting it back. The bus lurched forward, carrying us toward a confrontation that would change everything. I didn't know what awaited us at the factory, but I knew one thing: Mason's betrayal would not go unanswered, not this time. The bus to Cleveland rattled along the dusty highways of Ohio, its engine groaning under the weight of a sweltering July day in 1976. The air inside was stale thick with the smell of sweat and cigarette smoke, a fitting backdrop for the tension coiling in my chest. May Carter sat beside my daughter Emily, my father's Vietnam War medal pinned to his old military jacket. Its faint warmth was a reminder of my rebirth to save her future. Emily, 17 and usually so vibrant, stared out the window, her hands fidgeting with the frayed strap of her bag. We were headed to the steel factory where her father Mason worked as a foreman, determined to reclaim her Ivywood University admission letter, the one he'd stolen and given to Clara's son Holden in my past life. The 1970s were a tough time for rural families like ours. Economic recession had gutted towns like Willow Creek, leaving women with few paths beyond marriage or low-wage work. College was a distant dream, especially for girls who faced skepticism from a society that prized men's ambitions. Emily's dream of studying physics at Ivywood was a rebellion against that world, but Mason's betrayal threatened to crush it. In my first life, his cruel words, "You cracked under pressure, Emily. Marry William's boy and be done with it," had broken her spirit, pushing her into a life of hardship. Now reborn, I was determined to change that fate. Emily's silence on the bus was heavy, her earlier excitement dimmed by the post office clerk's words Mason had taken her letter. "Mom," she said softly, her voice barely audible over the bus's rumble. "Why would Dad pick up my letter without telling us? Does he think I don't deserve Ivywood?" Her hazel eyes, usually bright with determination, were clouded with doubt. I remembered her in our past life, sobbing after Mason's mockery, believing she'd failed because she wasn't good enough. He's always talking about Holden, she continued, her fingers twisting the bag strap, how he's so bright, so perfect. Maybe Dad's ashamed of me. Her words cut deeper than any knife, revealing the wound Mason's neglect had carved over the years. I took her hand, squeezing it gently. Emily, you're brilliant. Your father's wrong if he thinks otherwise. We're going to get that letter and prove it. My voice was firm, but inside I seethed. Mason's motivations were clear to me now. He'd married me at 18, pressured by my mother's promise of a hard-working wife, but he'd always resented our rural life. Clara, his high school sweetheart, now a widow with a son, represented the urban success he craved. Holden was his chosen heir, a boy he could mold to reflect his ambitions, while Emily, bright and defiant, was a reminder of the life he wanted to escape. Stealing her letter wasn't just favoritism, it was a deliberate act to keep her down to ensure Holden's path was clear. Emily leaned her head against the window, her voice barely a whisper. I studied so hard, Mom. Every night while Dad was gone, I'd read until my eyes burned. I wanted him to be proud like he is of Holden. But what if he doesn't care? Her vulnerability was a punch to my gut, echoing the despair of our past life, when she'd given up her dreams to work odd jobs, feeling she owed Mason for his factory labor. I stroked her hair, the metal's warmth pulsing against my chest. He's the wrong one, sweetheart. Not you. We're going to the factory to get answers, and I promise you'll have your chance at Ivywood. The bus lurched into Cleveland's industrial district, where the steel factory loomed its smokestacks, belching gray into the sky. The 1970s had turned places like this into battlegrounds of labor and survival, where men like Mason climbed ranks through charm and connections, often at the expense of their families. Emily's face was pale as we stepped off, her earlier hope replaced by a quiet fear. What if Dad's mad we came? She asked, her voice trembling. I adjusted my father's jacket, its bloodstains a testament to his sacrifice, and stood tall despite my limp. Let him be mad, I said, my resolve hardening. This is your future, Emily, and no one, not even your father, gets to steal it. We approached the factory gates, the clang of machinery drowning out the world. Workers in grimy overalls glanced at us, their whispers sharp country folks looking for handouts. Emily clutched my arm, her eyes darting nervously. I held the metal tightly, its power urging me forward. Mason was hiding behind his foreman's title, but I'd face him and demand the truth. Emily's heartbreak, raw and honest, fueled my mission. This confrontation would test us both, but I'd fight for her no matter the cost. The steel factory in Cleveland loomed like a fortress, its smokestacks spewing gray into the July 1976 sky, symbolizing the industrial grind that defined many lives in post-recession America. The air was thick with the acrid scent of molten metal, and the clang of machinery drowned out the world beyond the gates. I, May Carter, stood with my daughter Emily, my father's Vietnam War medal pinned to his blood-stained military jacket, its faint warmth urging me forward. We'd come to confront Mason, Emily's father, who'd stolen her Ivywood University admission letter and given it to Clara's son Holden. In 1970s Ohio, where economic hardship and gender biases stifled rural girls' dreams, that letter was Emily's ticket to a better life, a life Mason had denied her in my past existence. Emily, 17 and trembling, clung to my arm, her hazel eyes wide with unease. Mom, what if Dad's too busy to see us? She whispered, her voice barely audible over the factory's roar. Her doubt cut me, echoing the despair of our past life, when Mason's mockery had crushed her spirit, pushing her into a marriage with William's dim-witted son. He'll see us, I said firmly, my limp slowing my steps, but not my resolve. The metal pulsed, a reminder of my rebirth, to right this wrong. Mason, now a factory foreman, had climbed the ranks through charm and ambition, driven by a desire to escape our rural Willow Creek roots. His affair with Clara, his high school sweetheart, and his favoritism for her son Holden were deliberate choices to rewrite his life, casting Emily aside as a burden. A burly security guard in a stained uniform at the factory gates eyed us disdainfully. You here for Mason Carter? He grunted, spitting tobacco onto the gravel. Yes, he's my father, Emily said, her voice small but hopeful. The guard's expression soured. Mason's been promoted to regional manager and moved to the city months ago. You're his country relatives, huh? His words stung and whispers spread among nearby workers, poor folks begging for favors. Before I could respond, a sharp voice cut through the noise. "What are you doing here?" Evelyn Mason's mother stormed toward us, her face twisted with fury. In the 1970s, family loyalty often trumped justice, and Evelyn had always seen me as an unworthy rural bride for her son. Emily froze as Evelyn grabbed her arm, yanking her toward a nearby shed. "Mom," she cried, her voice cracking with fear. Evelyn shoved Emily into a chair, binding her wrists with a rope from the shed. "You're ruining my son's life, you little brat," she snarled, stuffing a filthy rag into Emily's mouth. I lunged my weakened body, no match for Evelyn's city-fed strength. She slapped Emily hard, leaving a red welt on her cheek. "Stop!" I screamed, clawing at Evelyn, but she pinned me to the ground, her fists raining down. "You brought this bastard to drag Mason down," she spat. In my past life, I'd learned Evelyn had been ill, draining our savings for her hospital care, but now she stood robust, her strength a stark contrast to my malnutrition-weakened frame. The crowd of workers gathered, their whispers sharp in the humid air. "She's Mason's arranged wife, chasing backdoor favors for her kid." Another sneered, trying to seduce Mason and pushing her daughter to do the same. The accusations resulted from the era's gossip-driven culture, where rural women were often dismissed as schemers. Emily's muffled sobs broke through the noise, her eyes pleading. "I want my letter," she managed, the rag slipping. Her pain fueled my rage. I struggled to my feet, clutching my father's medal. "Mason stole Emily's Ivywood letter," I shouted, my voice hoarse but defiant. "He's my husband, and he gave it to Clara's son." Evelyn laughed, a cruel sound. "Clara is his real family now. You're nothing but a country leech." Her words echoed Mason's betrayal, rooted in his shame of our rural life and his obsession with Clara's urban polish. Emily's face crumpled, her hope fading. "Dad doesn't want me," she whispered, tears streaming down her cheeks. Her heartbreak was raw. She was a girl desperate for her father's love, now facing his rejection. I knelt beside her, untying her wrists. "We're not leaving without that letter," I said, my voice steady despite the pain in my chest. The crowd's jeers grew louder, but the metal's warmth surged, urging me to stand tall. We'd face Mason no matter the cost and reclaim Emily's future from the man who'd stolen it. The Cleveland steel factory buzzed with the relentless clang of machinery, its smokestacks casting long shadows over the gravel lot where I May Carter stood, battered but unbowed, in July 1976. My father's Vietnam War medal pinned to his blood-stained military jacket pulsed with warmth, a reminder of my rebirth to save my daughter Emily's future. Emily, 17, knelt beside me, her wrists raw from the ropes Mason's mother Evelyn had used to bind her. Her cheek bore a red welt from Evelyn's slap, and her hazel eyes brimmed with tears. "Why does Dad hate me?" she whispered, her voice breaking. The crowd of factory workers jeered, their whispers sharp in the humid air, country trash begging for favors. In 1970s America, rural women like us were often dismissed as schemers, our ambitions mocked in a society that favored men and city folk. I clutched the medal, its power fueling my resolve. Mason, Emily's father, and my husband had stolen her Ivywood University admission letter, giving it to Clara's son Holden to secure his affair with his high school sweetheart. His ambition to escape our rural Willow Creek roots drove him to betray us, favoring Holden as a symbol of the urban success he craved. In my past life, his cruelty, Emily's not cut out for college, had pushed her into a life of hardship. Now reborn, I was determined to reclaim her future. Evelyn loomed over us, her face twisted with contempt. "Clara's Mason's real family," she spat. "You're nothing but a burden." Before I could respond, a sleek black car rolled into the lot, its polished chrome gleaming in stark contrast to the factory's grit. Mason stepped out, his foreman's jacket crisp, followed by Clara and Holden dressed in expensive clothes funded by Mason's government contracts. The crowd parted, their whispers turning to murmurs of admiration. Clara, her auburn hair perfectly styled, smirked at my tattered appearance. Holden, a lanky 18-year-old, strutted beside her, his smug grin a mirror of Mason's. Emily's breath hitched, her eyes locked on her father, searching for a flicker of love. "Dad," she said softly, hope flickering despite her pain. I staggered to my feet, raising my father's medal high. "Mason Carter." "I'm your legal wife," I shouted, my voice cutting through the factory noise. "You stole Emily's Ivywood letter and gave it to Holden. Give it back, or I'll report your bigamy." The crowd gasped, the accusation shattering the 1970s veneer of family propriety. Mason's face stiffened, his eyes darting to Clara. She stepped forward, her smile venomous, and snatched the medal from my hand. "This old thing. she sneered, smashing it to the ground. The crack of metal on gravel echoed like a gunshot. Emily cried out, lunging for it, but Holden stomped on her hand, grinding his heel into her fingers. "Stay down, country girl," he taunted. Emily's scream was raw, her pain fueling my rage. "Stop!" I roared, shoving Holden back. Mason, unmoved, slapped Emily hard across the face, his hand leaving a fresh mark. "You're embarrassing me," he growled, his eyes cold. Emily froze, staring at her father, the man she'd idolized despite his absence. "You hit me," she whispered, tears streaming. "I just wanted you to be proud." Her heartbreak was a knife to my heart, echoing her despair in our past life, when she'd given up her dreams after his mockery. The crowd's whispers grew louder. "She's pushing her daughter to trap Mason." The era's biases made us desperate, but I saw the truth. Mason's betrayal was rooted in his shame of our rural life and his obsession with Clara's polished world. I grabbed Emily, pulling her close. "You stole her future," I shouted at Mason, my voice trembling with fury. "She earned that letter, not Holden." Clara laughed, her voice dripping with condescension. "Accept reality, May. Emily's not Ivywood material. Mason and I won't allow backdoor admissions." Her words drew nods from the crowd, who saw her as a refined city woman, not the manipulator I knew her to be. Mason's silence was damning his loyalty to Clara and Holden clear. Emily sobbed, her confidence crumbling. "I thought you loved me, Dad," she said, her voice barely audible. The metal shattered on the ground seemed to dim, but its warmth lingered in my chest, urging me to fight. I stood taller despite the pain from Evelyn's blows. "My father was a war hero," I declared, pointing to the broken metal. "I demand justice from the factory leadership." The crowd hushed, some shifting uncomfortably. Mason's eyes narrowed, sensing a threat to his carefully built reputation. Clara's smile faltered, but she quickly recovered, tossing her hair. "Go back to your farm, May," she said. "You don't belong here." But I wasn't leaving. Emily's future hung in the balance, and I'd face any humiliation to reclaim it. The factory gates loomed like a battlefield, and I was ready for war. The Cleveland Steel Factory's gravel lot was a cauldron of tension on that sweltering July day in 1976, the air thick with the stench of molten metal and betrayal. May Carter stood battered, my father's shattered Vietnam War medal at my feet, its warmth fading, but still urging me to fight. My daughter Emily, 17, clutched her swollen hand, tears streaming down her face from the blows dealt by her father Mason and his mother Evelyn. The crowd of workers jeered their voices, a chorus of 1970s prejudice country schemers chasing Mason's status. Mason, now a factory foreman, stood with Clara and her son Holden. His betrayal bare, he'd stolen Emily's Ivywood University admission letter to secure Holden's future, driven by his affair and ambition to escape our rural Willow Creek roots. Emily's voice trembled as she looked at Mason. "Why, Dad, I just wanted you to be proud," she whispered, her hazel eyes searching for a father who'd never truly seen her. Her pain echoed our past life when his mockery had crushed her dreams, pushing her into a loveless marriage. I held her close, my limp body aching from Evelyn's attack, and shouted, "Mason, give back her letter." Clara's smug laugh cut through the noise, her polished city demeanor contrasting with my worn jacket. "Go home, May," she sneered. "Emily's not Ivywood material." The crowd nodded, their biases against rural women clear in an era where gender and class dictated opportunity. Suddenly, the factory gates swung open with a clang, silencing the crowd. A stern older man in a decorated military uniform stormed in, commanding the dusty lot like a general on a battlefield. It was Uncle Winston, a retired Vietnam War general whose steely gaze had once led troops through chaos. His chest bore medals earned alongside my father, a war hero whose sacrifice had forged their bond. Winston's authority stemmed from decades commanding military contracts that fueled factories like this one, giving him sway over Cleveland's industrial elite. He strode toward Mason and without hesitation slapped him hard across the face, the sound echoing like a thunderclap. "You disgrace your uniform!" Winston growled, his voice low but lethal. The crowd froze, their whispers dying. Mason stumbled back, his foreman's jacket creased while Clara's smile vanished. Emily gasped, her eyes wide. "Who's that?" she whispered, hope flickering through her pain. I clutched her hand, my heart racing. "Uncle Winston," I said softly, tears welling. In my past life, my father had entrusted Winston with my protection, giving him a sealed address and a promise help May if she's desperate. I'd lost contact after marrying Mason, honoring my father's dying wish not to seek Winston unless my life depended on it. Now reborn, I knew this was that moment. Winston's eyes softened as he knelt beside me, his weathered hands lifting the broken metal. "You look just like your father," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "He'd be proud of you, May." Turning to Emily, he added, "And you, young lady, are his granddaughter in spirit." Emily's tears fell faster, her voice small. "I got into Ivywood, sir. Dad took my letter." Winston's jaw tightened, his gaze piercing Mason. "Is this true?" he demanded. Mason stammered. "She failed, sir. I couldn't pull strings for her." His lie was flimsy, rooted in his shame of our rural life and his obsession with Clara's urban polish. In the 1970s, men like Mason leveraged connections to climb, often at the expense of their own families. Winston waved a hand, and two medics in white coats rushed forward, checking my bruises and Emily's swollen hand. "You're safe now," he told us, his authority a shield against the crowd's judgment. Emily leaned into me, whispering, "Can he help us?" Her hope, fragile but growing, was a spark in the darkness. Winston stood tall, addressing the crowd. "This girl earned her place at Ivywood. I'll see to it she gets there." His promise was a lifeline, cutting through the era's biases that dismissed rural girls. Mason's face paled, sensing his control slipping. Clara stepped forward, her voice sharp. "Sir, this is a misunderstanding. Emily's just causing trouble." Winston's glare silenced her. "I knew her grandfather," he said coldly. "You don't want to test me." I gripped Emily's hand, the metal's fragments glinting in the dust. Winston's arrival had shifted the battlefield, giving us a champion in a world that had turned against us. The fight for Emily's future was far from over, but with Winston by our side, I felt hope for the first time. We'd reclaim that letter no matter what Mason and Clara threw at us. The Cleveland Steel Factory's gravel lot stood hushed in the July 1976 heat, the clang of machinery a distant hum as Uncle Winston, a retired Vietnam War general, towered over the scene. His decorated uniform gleamed starkly, contrasting the gritty industrial backdrop of post-recession America. I, May Carter, held my daughter Emily, close, my father's shattered Vietnam War medal clutched in my hand, its faint warmth a lifeline from my rebirth. Emily, 17, her cheek bruised from Mason's slap, whispered, "Mom, can he get my letter back?" Her hazel eyes, red from tears, flickered with fragile hope. The crowd of workers, their earlier jeers silenced by Winston's authority, watched warily. In 1970s Ohio, where gender and class biases often crushed rural dreams, Winston's presence was a rare force, his military clout tied to contracts that kept factories like this alive. Mason, my husband, and Emily's father stood pale beside Clara and her son Holden, whose foreman's jacket was rumpled from Winston's slap. His betrayal, stealing Emily's Ivywood University admission letter for Holden, was laid bare, rooted in his ambition to escape our Willow Creek roots, and his affair with Clara, his high school sweetheart. Clara's polished demeanor faltered, her auburn hair catching the sunlight as she muttered, "This is a misunderstanding, sir." Winston's glare cut her off. "Enough lies," he said, his voice like steel. Turning to me, he softened, cradling the broken metal. "Your father was my brother in arms, May. He saved my life in '68. I swore to protect you." His words stirred memories of my father's final days, entrusting me with the medal and a sealed address for Winston to be used only in desperation. This was that moment. Emily's voice trembled. "I worked so hard for Ivywood, sir. Dad took my letter, and I don't know why." Her pain was raw, a girl betrayed by the father she'd idolized. In our past life, Mason's mockery, "You're not cut out for college," had pushed her into a life of hardship. Now her doubt mirrored that despair. Winston knelt beside her, his eyes kind. "You're going to college, sweetheart. I'll make sure of it." He stood addressing the crowd. "This girl earned her place. We're going to the education board to prove it." The workers shifted, some nodding, others skeptical, reflecting the era's distrust of rural women's ambitions. Winston led us to his jeep, the medic still tending Emily's swollen hand. As we drove to Cleveland's education board, Emily leaned against me, whispering, "I thought Dad loved me, Mom." "Why does he choose Holden?" Her question echoed the gender biases of the time where sons were prized over daughters. I stroked her hair. "It's not about you, Emily. It's his shame, his choices." Mason's ambition had driven him to favor Holden, seeing him as a path to urban respectability, while Emily's brilliance threatened his fragile ego. The Jeep rumbled through Cleveland's streets, past factories and tenements, a city struggling to rebuild after economic turmoil. At the education board, a stern clerk pulled Emily's file. Winston's presence, backed by his military influence, ensured swift action. Her scores are top tier, the clerk confirmed, glaring at Mason's name on a note. A Mr. Carter collected her letter, claiming she had failed. Winston's jaw tightened. Reissue it, now. The clerk nodded, typing a new letter confirming Emily's admission to Ivywood for advanced physics. Emily's eyes widened, a sob escaping. "I got in," she whispered, clutching the paper like a lifeline. "But Dad?" He lied. Her heartbreak was palpable, the betrayal cutting deeper than any bruise. I held her tight, the metal's fragments warm in my pocket. "You're going to shine, sweetheart," I said, my voice steady. Winston turned to me, his voice low. "Mason will answer for this. My connections run deep, factory boards, military oversight. He's not untouchable. His authority earned through decades of command was our shield." Emily looked at him, hope battling her pain. "Will Dad ever care about me?" she asked, her voice small. Winston's eyes softened. "He's a fool if he doesn't. You're your grandfather's legacy." The words lifted her, a spark of pride in her tear-streaked face. As we left the board, the new letter in hand, I felt the weight of our past life lift. Mason's lies were unraveling, but the fight wasn't over. Clara and Holden still loomed, and Mason's desperation would grow. Yet with Winston by our side and Emily's future secured, we were ready for whatever came next. The Cleveland sky was bruised with dusk as Uncle Winston's Jeep pulled away from the education board in July 1976, the newly reissued Ivywood University admission letter clutched tightly in Emily's hands. I, May Carter, sat beside my daughter, my father's shattered Vietnam War medal warm in my pocket. Its power is a quiet reminder of my rebirth to save her future. Emily, 17, stared at the letter, her hazel eyes flickering between pride and pain. "I got in, Mom," she whispered, her voice trembling. "But Dad, he tried to take this from me." Her hurt was raw, a girl grappling with her father's betrayal. In 1970s America, where rural girls like Emily faced steep odds, this letter was her defiance against a world that expected her to settle. The factory district's smokestacks loomed behind us, symbolizing the industrial grind that had shaped Mason's ambition and his betrayal. Mason, my husband and Emily's father, had stolen her original letter to give to Clara's son Holden, driven by his desire to escape our Willow Creek roots. In the 1970s, men like Mason, born into rural poverty, chased status through connections and cunning. His affair with Clara, his high school sweetheart, was more than lust. It was a calculated step toward an urban life he craved with Holden as the son he could mold into a symbol of success. The bright and defiant Emily reminded him of the rural life he despised, her potential a threat to his carefully crafted image. "He always wanted a son like Holden," Emily said softly, her fingers tracing the letter. "I thought if I made him proud, he'd love me." Her words echoed our past life, when his mockery had pushed her into a life of hardship. Back at the factory, Mason's world was crumbling. Uncle Winston's intervention, backed by his military clout, had sparked whispers among the factory board. By morning, a curt letter arrived at Mason's city apartment. He was demoted to line worker, stripped of his foreman's title and the company housing that came with it. The news hit him like a sledgehammer. He stood in his cramped living room, Clara lounging on a velvet couch, her auburn hair catching the lamplight. "It's that woman's fault," he muttered, meaning me. Clara, ever the manipulator, saw opportunity in his ruin. "We can recover, Mason," she purred, her voice smooth as silk. "I've got a deal, a prominent investor from Chicago. Give me your savings and we'll secure Holden's future." Blinded by his need for Clara's approval, Mason handed over every cent, unaware she was plotting her escape. Clara's scheme was a product of the era's economic flux, where get-rich-quick promises lured desperate men like Mason. The 1970s saw scams flourish as cities rebuilt, and Clara, with her city polish, played Mason like a pawn. She'd never loved him, seeing him only as a means to fund Holden's ambitions. Mason's motivations were more apparent now. His betrayal wasn't just cruelty, but a desperate bid to redefine himself through Clara's world. He'd married me under pressure, resenting my rural simplicity, and saw Emily as a burden, not a daughter. His demotion shattered that illusion, leaving him grasping for Clara's promises. Emily and I, meanwhile, found refuge in a small motel near the factory, courtesy of Winston's connections. As we sat on the worn bed, Emily clutched her letter, her voice soft. "I keep thinking about Dad's face when he hit me. He looked at me like I was nothing." Her pain fueled my resolve. He's wrong, Emily, I said, brushing her hair back. You're going to Ivywood and you'll shine brighter than he ever could. Her smile, tentative but growing, was a spark of hope. Winston joined us, his eyes warm. Your father saved my life, May, he said. His medal brought you back for a reason. Emily's your legacy. His words, grounded in his decades of military authority, strengthened us. The education board had confirmed Emily's top scores, and the reissued letter was proof of her merit, a victory against the era's biases that favored boys like Holden. As we prepared to return to Willow Creek, Mason's desperation grew. He paced his apartment, Clara's vague assurances about the investment ringing hollow. Holden's going to college, right? He asked, clinging to his dream. Clara nodded, her smile cold, already planning her exit with Holden and the money. Mason's downfall was swift due to his greed and betrayal, but the fight ended. Clara and Holden still loomed, and I knew they'd strike back. Yet with Emily's letter secured and Winston's support, we were ready to face them, our resolve forged in the fire of justice. The sun hung low over Willow Creek, Ohio, in late July 1976, casting golden light across the dusty fields that defined our rural hometown. The air carried the scent of hay and engine oil, a reminder of the hardscrabble life in post-recession America. May Carter stood in our weathered farmhouse, my father's shattered Vietnam War medal tucked in my pocket, its lingering warmth a testament to my rebirth to save my daughter Emily's future. Emily, 17, sat at our kitchen table, her Ivywood University admission letter reissued thanks to Uncle Winston's intervention clutched in her hands. Her hazel eyes, still shadowed by her father Mason's betrayal, flickered with quiet pride. I'm going to college, Mom said softly, her voice tinged with disbelief. But I keep seeing Dad's face when he hit me. How could he choose Holden over me? Her pain, raw and deep, mirrored the despair of our past life, when Mason's cruelty had pushed her into a life of hardship. In the 1970s in rural America, girls like Emily were expected to marry young, and their dreams were secondary to family duty. Her admission to Ivywood, a prestigious university, was a rare triumph defying the era's gender biases. Once a factory foreman, Mason had stolen her original letter to give to Clara's son Holden, driven by his affair with his high school sweetheart and his ambition to escape Willow Creek's stigma. His demotion, sparked by Winston's military influence, had stripped him of his city apartment and status, leaving him scrambling to salvage his dreams through Clara's false promises of a Chicago investment. His betrayal wasn't just personal, it was a product of a society that valued men's ambitions over women's potential and sons over daughters. The creak of our porch announced an unwelcome visitor. Mason stood there, his once crisp foreman's jacket wrinkled, his eyes burning with desperation. May, he snapped, stepping inside without invitation. You ruined everything. Winston demoted me because of you. His accusation was absurd, but it revealed his delusion. He'd always seen me as a rural burden, marrying me under pressure from my mother, resenting my simplicity while idolizing Clara's urban polish. Emily stood, her hands trembling. Dad, why did you take my letter? She asked, her voice steady despite her hurt. Mason ignored her, turning to me. He said William was offering $30,000 to marry Emily, his tone cold. She's a good breeder. Take the money and I'll use it to fund my business with Clara. You'll get a cut, call it charity. The words hit like a slap. Emily's face crumpled, her voice breaking. You want to sell me? I'm your daughter. Her pain was a knife, echoing the betrayal she'd felt at the factory. Mason's mockery had crushed her dreams in our past life, and now he sought to barter her future for his gain. Rage surged through me, fueled by the metal's warmth. Say that again, I dared, my voice low and fierce. Mason smirked, repeating, marry her off. It's practical. Clara and I will eat meat, but you'll get the soup. His callousness was staggering, a reflection of his desperation to cling to Clara's promises, blind to her manipulation. I grabbed a broom from the corner, swinging it with all my strength. Get out, I screamed, the wood cracking against his shoulder. Mason stumbled back, blood trickling from a cut on his brow. You're unhinged, he shouted, but I swung again, driving him toward the door. You broke her heart, Mason. You don't get to sell her now. Emily stepped forward, her eyes blazing. I'm going to Ivywood, Dad. You can't stop me. Her defiance, born from pain, was a spark of the strength she'd reclaim. Mason fled, muttering about my uncivilized ways, his pride wounded. The village had gathered outside, drawn by the commotion. That's Mason, the big shot foreman. A farmer scoffed, thought he was too good for Willow Creek. Another laughed. He doesn't even know his daughter. Their sarcasm stung Mason, who slunk away humiliated. The villagers, simple and kind, rallied around us. "Emily's our first college girl," the village chief said, pressing a small bundle of cash into my hands, donations from neighbors who'd scrimped to support her. "Keep your house," May, he urged. "Home's your anchor." Their warmth, starkly contrasting with Mason's betrayal, filled my heart. Emily hugged me, whispering, "They believe in me, Mom." Her hope, fragile but growing, was a victory against the era's constraints. As we stood on the porch, the metal's warmth pulsed. Mason's downfall was deepening, but Clara and Holden were still out there scheming. With the village's support and Emily's letter secured, we were stronger than ever, ready to face whatever came next. The fields of Willow Creek, Ohio, shimmered under the August 1976 sun, the air heavy with the scent of ripe corn and the distant hum of rural life. I, May Carter, stood in our modest farmhouse, my father's shattered Vietnam War medal warm in my pocket, a symbol of my rebirth to save my daughter Emily's future. Emily, 17, sat nearby, her Ivywood University admission letter on the table, her hazel eyes reflecting a mix of pride and lingering pain. "I can't believe Dad tried to sell me," she whispered, her voice steady, but scarred by Mason's betrayal. In 1970s rural America, where economic hardship and gender biases stifled girls' dreams, Emily's acceptance to Ivywood was a defiant victory. The village's support, small donations, and heartfelt encouragement had buoyed us, starkly contrasting with Mason's cruelty. Once a factory foreman, Mason had stolen Emily's original letter to give to Clara's son, Holden, driven by his affair with his high school sweetheart and his ambition to escape Willow Creek's poverty. His demotion, sparked by Uncle Winston's military influence, had stripped him of status and housing, pushing him to cling to Clara's false promises of a Chicago investment. His motivations were rooted in shame. He'd married me under pressure, resenting our rural life, and saw Holden as a son who could elevate his image. At the same time, Emily's brilliance threatened his ego. Back in Cleveland, Mason's world was collapsing, his desperation closing his eyes to Clara's deceit. Mason found a note from Clara in their city apartment, her elegant handwriting vicious: "Holden's not your son, you fool. You broke your real daughter's heart. I never loved you." The truth hit like a thunderbolt. Clara had used him, siphoning his savings for a scam with a supposed Chicago investor. She and Holden had fled, leaving Mason with nothing. Enraged, he collapsed, his face sagging from a stroke, his mouth drooping, his body half paralyzed. The 1970s economy, rife with scams preying on desperate men, had ensnared him. Clara and Holden, meanwhile, had spiraled into ruin. Their investor was a con artist who'd cleaned them out. In a desperate act, Holden, impulsive and arrogant, killed the man with Clara's help. By week's end, they were behind bars, their dreams of wealth shattered. Mason, discharged from the hospital, was a broken man, his dignity gone as he struggled to walk or speak. He and his mother, Evelyn, returned to Willow Creek, living in a shack, scavenging for food. Once scornful of Mason's city airs, the village now pitied him. He sent a message through a neighbor begging to see Emily. "Tell my daughter I'm sorry," he slurred, his words barely coherent. Emily, sitting with me on our porch, shook her head. "He's not my father anymore," her voice firm but heavy. "He never changed my diapers, never fed me. He chose Holden every time." Her rejection was final, a girl reclaiming her worth after years of neglect. In our past life, Mason's cruelty had crushed her. Now she stood tall, her Ivywood letter a symbol of her strength. I faced Mason one last time, his frail form propped against a fence, Evelyn beside him, gaunt and silent. "You're heartless," he gurgled, drool staining his shirt. "Why won't Emily care for me?" I echoed his words. "We were never legally married, Mason. Why should we owe you anything?" His eyes widened, the truth of his abandonment sinking in. In the 1970s, men like Mason leaned on societal expectations of family duty, but I owed him nothing. "You broke her heart," I said, my voice cold. "This is your karma." He slumped, defeated, as Evelyn led him away, their figures fading into the fields, a pitiful end to their pride. Emily watched them go, her expression resolute. Mom said, "I'm done hoping for his love," clutching her letter. "Ivywood's my future now." Her strength, forged in pain, was a testament to her resilience, defying the era's limits on rural girls. The village chief stopped by, offering more support. "Emily's our pride," he said, handing us a basket of bread and eggs. The community's warmth, rooted in shared struggle, contrasted with Mason's selfishness, gives us a foundation to rebuild. The metal's warmth pulsed as the sun set, a sign we'd won this battle. Mason, Clara, and Holden had fallen, but our fight for Emily's future was far from over. The autumn of 1976 painted Willow Creek, Ohio, in hues of gold and crimson, the fields alive with the rustle of harvest. May Carter stood outside our farmhouse, my father's shattered Vietnam War medal warm in my pocket. Its power reminded me of my rebirth to save my daughter Emily's future. Emily, now 18, was preparing to leave for Ivywood University, and her admission letter was reissued after Uncle Winston's intervention and was tucked safely in her bag. Her hazel eyes sparkled with determination, but a shadow lingered. "Mom, I'm ready for college, but I still see Dad's face when he hit me," she said, her voice soft but steady. "I want to be strong like you." In 1970s rural America, where economic hardship and gender biases often crushed girls' dreams, Emily's journey to Ivywood was a defiant triumph, a testament to her resilience. The past months had been a whirlwind. Mason, my husband, and Emily's father had fallen hard, his betrayal stealing her letter for Clara's son Holden, unraveled by Winston's military clout. Driven by the ambition to escape Willow Creek's poverty, Mason had chosen Clara's urban polish over us, seeing Holden as his ticket to status and Emily as a burden. His demotion, Clara's scam, and their subsequent ruin, Clara and Holden jailed for murder after a failed con, were karmic justice. Mason, now a stroke-ridden shell, lived with his mother Evelyn in a shack, their pride stripped bare. Emily had rejected his pleas for forgiveness, saying he was never my father. Her words, born from years of neglect, marked her growth, a girl reclaiming her worth in an era that often denied it to women. With Winston's support, I'd moved us to a small apartment near Ivywood's campus in Columbus, using funds from my father's military compensation, which he'd entrusted to Winston years ago. "Your dad knew your mother favored sons," Winston had said, handing me an envelope thick with cash. "He wanted you safe." The money, a final gift from my father, whose medal had sparked my rebirth, eased our transition. I opened a diner near campus, and after my years of cooking for neighbors in Willow Creek, I now serve plates of meatloaf and pie to students and locals. The restaurant thrived, its warmth contrasting with the 1970s economic struggles where rural families like ours scraped by on little. Customers filled the booths, drawn by fair prices, and my story, a single mother fighting for her daughter's dreams. Emily flourished at Ivywood, her advanced physics classes igniting her passion. "I'm top of my class, Mom," she told me one evening, her smile bright as she described her professor's praise. "I want to build things and work on space tech." Once dimmed by Mason's betrayal, her ambition burned fiercely, defying the era's limits on women. She made friends, and her shy demeanor gave way to confidence. One day, as we walked through campus, she glanced at Winston's son David, a kind engineering student who'd helped her with math. "I'm not ready for love yet," she said, blushing. "But when I am, I want someone like Grandpa, strong, not selfish like Dad." Her words, rooted in her grandfather's legacy, showed her healing, a girl learning to trust again. The village of Willow Creek remained our anchor. On weekends, we'd return, greeted by neighbors who'd donated to Emily's journey, our college girl. The chief called her pride in his eyes. Their support, a lifeline in a time when rural communities leaned on each other, grounded us. I kept our farmhouse, heeding the chief's advice, "Home's your root." The medal, its pieces stored in a small box, no longer pulsed, its purpose fulfilled. My father's voice, which had whispered, "Rewrite her future at my death," was silent, but his love lived in Emily's success. As winter 1977 dawned, I stood outside the diner watching Emily laugh with friends under a gentle snow. The 1970s were hard, but we'd carved a path through their barriers. "You did it, Mom," Emily said, hugging me. "You gave me this." I smiled, the weight of our past life lifted. "We did it together," I replied. The sun broke through the clouds, a soft breeze carrying hope. Emily's future was hers now, and I knew wherever my father was, he was proud.